changes to the
Don't care. Don't care.
game, and that is Tracer.
Don't care. Don't care.
Like,
Don't care. Don't care. Don't care. Don't care. Okay.
But let's get started. Now, first off, we gotta talk about Tracer's primary fire. It starts to fall up at 13 plus meters, but that makes it pretty strong from the high ground. So if you're playing Tracer, especially if you are trying to engage a target or you're just trying to whittle down tanks, playing on the high ground can make you safer because you have a form of natural cover and can give you a vantage point to engage. So it is very good to position here. Now, right off the bat, though, one big
That is really misleading information. If you have high ground that you can engage from within your 13 plus meters, fall off range, then obviously high ground's better, but the situations where that's actually applicable are really in the minority. Like most high grounds in Overwatch, the general pathing lines that fall underneath those high grounds are generally more than 13 plus meters. In other words, when you're on high ground, generally the enemy team is further away than 13 plus meters. It's just the way the maps are constructed. So this is information that's going to be misapplied, I guarantee you. So even though it's technically true, because it's misapplied and given with bad context, I'm going to give this a big fat X. That's going to really hurt some players.
big mistake that happens with primary.
I don't know. Automod is goofed off. I've done nothing to Automod. Twitch mod has gone out of control.
His players try to either aim too high up on the head or they just aim for the body. You should be aiming about neck level because then the spread will hit the maximum amount on the person and the upper spread will be headshotting, and that's the way that you get the maximum amount of damage on average, unless of course you're from those really close ranges, or you could just do all headshots. Now moving on to the next ability we got to talk about is Blink, Tracer's bread and butter, and learning to control this is really the most important aspect of tapping into Tracer's strengths, and it's one of the consistent things where you automatically know. I mean, if you look at a Tracer, you look at a VOD, and you look at how they're blinking, you could automatically deduce what rank they are, basically right off the bat, because blink management and learning how to control blinks is something that really needs to be developed before you maximize the impact on this character. Now, the different types of things you're gonna have to be able to do automatically, basically without even thinking about it, is the blink melee, the 180 blink, the 90-degree blink, and the biggest mistake with blinks in general is using it for engagement and not for dueling. And what I mean by this is players will use their blinks to get close to a target. They'll use it to get close to an enemy, get close to a Zen. They'll use 2, 3 blinks, get close to the Zen, and make contact, right? You make contact, but that's not enough. You need this ability in order to duel the enemy. You need this ability in order to stall and dodge cooldowns, and you need this ability to exchange it for damage. Let me give you this example. What happens if you go up against a McCree and you have no blinks, right? You're gonna get flash and kill, okay? That's pretty obvious. But if you could use a little bit of damage blink, a little bit of damage blink, a little bit of damage blink, at some point that McCree would have been pressured to use, of course, his stun. You could have dodged it because you had abilities, and you could win that matchup that would have been very difficult otherwise. And this is why at the higher ranks, people understand that Tracer can actually counter McCree in a lot of instances. But a lot of people think that just McCree is just way better than Tracer, could shut her down, but that is because poor ability use. You need to realize that if you can change or exchange your blinks for damage, you put on tons of pressure on the enemy, and if you engage an enemy when you have your maximum amount of blinks, this is going to allow you to convert your blinks into damage or kills far easier. Now moving on to the next.
So that was good. I think that he hit some good feedback there with how to use blinks and common misconceptions, and gave some good examples as well. So I think that was actually really well done.
Ability that is a hallmark for Tracer, and it's recall. And importantly, recall has a 12-second cooldown, which is something that you need to remember in your brain. Like, if you play Tracer enough and you're thinking about it, you need to make sure that you learn this like it's the back of your hand. I can't tell you how many times when I was learning Tracer, I would go in, do a whole bunch of stuff, press my recall button, and I wouldn't recall. And I'm like, oh crap, I was 2 seconds off because my internal clock was wrong, and it got me killed. And if you don't even have to think about it, that is the best, because when you're really focusing and doing all this stuff, you can't just be looking at your cooldown tick down. You can't do any of that. You have to be knowing kind of when this is online automatically in a team fight, so that you don't blink, hope to recall, and you don't have it, and you can time your abilities accordingly. Now, recall, of course, brings you 3 seconds back and can animation cancel anything. So if you melee, you can recall. You can even get in a melee and animation cancel it with a recall. So you could do something like 180 blink melee recall, and it will do the damage before it even comes out. It will do it automatically. That is a way to get that last bit of burst damage, and that's something that a lot of people do, especially at the higher ranks when you're playing at such a tiny margin of death, right? You are literally flying in at the tiny little sliver of life and death. Or if you stay out for even a millisecond longer, you're gonna get headshotted. So you have to kind of burst in and recall and really min-max every single decision and every single value that you get, no matter what. Another thing is recall returns your ammo, so you could do something like recall, and right away you can go to shooting something if something is low. And you do, generally, with recall, you need to be trying to accomplish as much as you can before you use a recall, and then have a plan post-recall. And what am I talking about, a plan? Well, the most obvious one is just to retreat, right? You just run away, you recall, you're safe, and you run away or do whatever. You wait until your recall is back online, and then you engage again. But that's not always the correct game plan, because imagine if you did all this damage, you couldn't finish off a target, you recall, and you're decently close to them, but they're like, you know, 20 HP or something like that. And maybe you have 2 blinks, you blink in, you kill them, you blink away, and you can still get out. That is called creating a game plan, but you have to have this game plan before you invest the recall. You should be thinking about exactly what you're going to be doing before you recall, so that you can already start doing it after. And if you ever watch someone like Kabaji or any high-level Tracer players, you will see the moment after they recall, they sometimes will go straight in, blink right at someone, spray, melee, kill them, and then blink away. Like, they know what they're going to do before their recall even finishes, and that is what you need to do. You're going to develop a sixth sense as you do this more, but it's something that you need to be thinking about, or else you're not going to be getting the maximum amount of value on recall. Now, the last deployment we got to talk about is
that's fine.
Which could do
there's nothing really special there with recall. It's you use it, you try and avoid wasting it. I think one little thing that he could have said would have been make sure that you don't use recall if you have the opportunity to get healed or health packed. Avoid using it. It's a long cooldown.
355 damage, of course, with the 350 damage explosion, with a 5 damage stick. But importantly, make sure that you don't stick a sleeping target, because it will wake them up. If you're trying to kill a sleeping target, throw it next to them so that they can't wake up and just like...
Kind of an odd little thing to say, but sure.
Recall or whatever. Now, the easiest way to secure pulse bombs is to blink into it. This is what SBB does on NYXL a lot. He will blink in really close to the target and basically just track them right up to them, like as if you were a Reaper shooting them, and he'll just pulse bomb them that way. It is the most consistent way, it is reliable, and that's what you need out of pulse bombs. Consistent, reliable kills, and that is how you're going to carry a lot of games. Now, if an enemy is standing completely still, you can do a 180, because like if an enemy is like backing up, for instance, or just standing still, doing a 180, you stick it onto their backside. It's a pretty simple way, and you get a little bit more time to line it up, because an enemy's not looking right at you, and if they turn around, they're still going to be stationary. Now, if an enemy is AD spamming, they're going left and right, to you, like you're looking directly at them, and they're going to your left and your right. Well, if you blink to the 90-degree angle of them, now that left and right is actually front and back to you. And if an enemy is going front and back to you, it is so easy for you to stick them. So if an enemy is AD spamming you because they're trying to dodge your fire or one of your allies' fire, just 90 and stick. And this is why learning the 180s and the 90s is really important. You need to be able to do this on demand. Just sit in a practice room, unlimited blinks, just practice 90, 90, 90, 90, 180, 180, 180, 90, 180, 190. You know, just do it again and again and again. And if you can make this like part of your, your skill set, you're going to have such a better time on Tracer. You're going to get more pulse bomb damage, and you're going to be just better mechanically in general. And not enough people practice this. You can legitimately practice this, just a couple.
It's kind of strange that we're not talking about blinks again when we're talking about pulse bombs, but he is right. Like, this is one of the situations where it is okay to practice things in a practice range or a custom game rather than to go play the game, because it is a mechanical thing that doesn't require you to be playing up against real players for you to get some effectiveness out of it. Now, obviously, taking it in a practice range to play it in a real game is a little bit tougher, but the actual muscle memory is the same. It's not like I'm reacting to aiming against non-moving realistic targets, but you're just practicing the motion. It's like practicing Doomfist rollouts. It's like practicing monkey jump accuracy. So that's fine.
Hours a day for like 4 weeks or maybe even 3 weeks, and you'll be a god at it just like that. Now, the next thing about pulse bombs is you should be tracking cooldowns that can stop it. Things like, Bubble on Zarya could be a big one. You do not want one ability to trade for this.
It's really just Bubble and Zarya. Bubble and Zarya and maybe Matrix. Yeah, my hair is getting...
What happened to it?
It got bushed.
You gotta make sure that you need...
Smart one.
Huh?
Don't you have to be smart one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Either find an isolated target that can't get bailed out, or you make sure that these cooldowns aren't online. The worst thing in the world is to like throw a pulse bomb on someone and it just gets completely neutralized.
It's really just Matrix and Bubble, and mostly Bubble, because Matrix you can play around.
If it would have went off, you would have just carried the entire team fight. So make sure that you're tracking these cooldowns, and like I said, train this individually, and you will have
or like Moira Fade.
Such a better...
Shut up, Dark Vink.
Time. Another thing about just the 180s and the 90s, I said, you can actually just go in and also have unlimited pulse bombs and practice 90-degree pulse bombs, 180-degree pulse bombs. You can stick honest with pulse bombs, whatever. You practice this ability and you will get better at it.
Oh, he's back.
But in a game, how many times
I'm not 900 SR. I said I peaked 1K, like almost 1K. It was like 970. Like, actually kind of pathetic that you have to lie about it. I'm not 900 SR.
Practicing pulse bombs. I mean, maybe like 10, I don't know, maybe 15 in a game, but you could legitimately practice thousands in the course of a couple hours. So definitely set up a training room and practice this ultimate. Now, moving on to the top 4 tips so that you can really dominate the opposition and easily climb. Now, the first tip that I'm going to
Of course he's hacking. That's not all hacking, but it's helping.
is master movement on Tracer. You see, Tracer has a tiny little body and a really manipulative hitbox on her head. If you learn how to crouch AD spam in the right way, where it's like a flow, where you crouch AD spam back and forth, and you really move that head hitbox really, really sporadically, it is so hard for Widowmakers, McCree's, Ashes to headshot you. And that is really important because it increases your survivability. A lot of times at the lower tiers of play, you automatically can tell because of their movement. So you know that if you want to climb to the upper tiers, movement could be holding you back. And what I would highly suggest is go into a third-person workshop mode, and you can easily see how your movement is affecting your hitbox, and try to move in a way where your hitbox moves as crazy as possible, because then it's almost impossible for enemies to headshot you when it's just moving that insanely. Now, moving on to the second tip that I got for you, and this is really important, and being alive is always best. And what do I mean by this? Well, it is really important on Tracer to play with cooldowns. Now, you should be going in, of course, when you have your cooldowns, but it is okay to not do anything if you don't have your cooldowns. You go in, you try to get value, nothing works, you fish, you fish, you fish, you don't get anything, you recall, wait for all your cooldowns to come back online before you go in again.
Sure. I would say don't not do anything, but sometimes you don't not do anything. But you do have to be very careful.
Important.
Did he coach DeFran? No, I didn't coach DeFran. If he wanted me to, but I turned him down. It was like one of the situations where I was coaching teams and players were asking me for individual coaching, and obviously I couldn't do both. I couldn't do both.
And it is really the only way, I mean, realistically, the only way you'll die if you have no cooldowns, right? And sure, enemies can try to force this out of you, but if you play in a way where you only go in when you have ammo resources and you are maintaining a passively strong position before you get your cooldowns back online, that is a way that you're just going to live a lot, you're going to set yourself up for better engagements, and you're never going to get caught with your pants down in the middle of the enemy team with no recall, no blinks. Then moving on to tip number 3, and this one is very, very important, and a lot of people don't really understand this concept, but it's set up for engaging the enemy as your team does. And what I mean by that is, before you even start in the game, set yourself up for a good position. Those passively strong positions I talked about.
Very good. Very important for Tracer.
Well, you're in position to make a play, right? Okay, so like imagine an example where your team are pushing a point, and instead of you going right in...
Don't breathe. Don't. What do you mean professional? I'm an insane... I'm a professional that didn't need to hack to get out of the gutter.
And you're way faster than your team, so you're going to go right in, do damage, recall, and then you're going to be basically AFK for like 12 seconds, right? If you instead route all the way to the backside of the enemy, or on the high ground, now you wait there, and as your team engage, and your enemies are focusing on your team, they're using cooldowns, they're putting pressure, and they're taking damage from your team, that is where you become a little gnat in their side. That is when you engage with all your cooldowns and all your burst damage, because what happens? One of their supports took a fire strike, one of their team got naded, now you have an opportunity to go pick the other support, or the other DPS, or whatever. But what happens a lot with Tracer players is instead of doing this, they try to engage really rapidly on one person in the back line, and like 4 people peel. 4 people peel for that one Zen, and then you either end up dead or you recall. And then what happens after that? If you end up dead, your team go in anyway and they lose. And if you don't end up dead, you basically just are AFK for 12 seconds. Now, if you would have just instead waited for the enemy team to be focused on something else, and
listen, chat, this is important.
Zen in the back line because he took a little bit of damage. How easy is it for you to kill that Zen if enemies don't know where you are, you have full cooldowns, and that guy's not getting peeled? It's pretty simple, right? You're just gonna delete that guy, and then you can either go back and just wait for your cooldowns to come back online, or because the team fight is ramping up in that way, a lot of times you're gonna be able to have momentum, kill, and you carried an entire team fight. But if you were dead, maybe your team does that low damage to that Zen, but he gets healed up. Maybe there was a lot of like opportunity to get value if you were there, but you weren't because you fed and died because you went in too quickly and you didn't set up for your engage. So this is one of the most important tips that I have for you. Definitely think about it in your game. It is so vital.
That was great. That was good engagement timing, man. Engagement timing is so important. Are you hacking? I mean, you literally told me that you're hacking because you're 3500. So yeah.
Last tip that I got for you, and this one's also pretty important, but at the end of the day, on Tracer, the true carry potential comes out when you can win the one.
What hack am I using? I mean, I know of at least 30, 40, 50, 60 different hacks. It could be any of them.
You want. This is why I always suggest...
I mean, not gonna lie. I mean, I have a photographic memory, and a buddy of mine sent me a full list of hackers because he works for the NSA, and obviously I memorized it, and I'm sure it was one of the ones I know about.
Tried free-for-all because you're up against a lot of your counters, characters that are really hard to duel sometimes, like McCree's, other Tracers, Genjis, Hanzos. You learn the 1v1 because at its core, if you master the movement and you up your mechanical skill and all this stuff I talked about, if you can win 1v1s, that is just such a huge advantage. I mean, as a Tracer, if you're confident in your gameplay, you can do so many things that are just abusive. I mean, straight up abusive to an enemy. Imagine an Ana dies on the enemy team, right? And you as a Tracer go literally into their spawn and spawn camper again. That is what you could do, and that is what high-level Tracers can do. You can do the same thing to McCree's. You can do the same thing to Reapers. At the end of the day, if you are a god tier Tracer that's confident in yourself, you are not afraid of any 1v1 with any character in the entire game, and you can take those 1v1s, and if you could win, not only do you get a free kill because you kill that person, you go route to a mega, you get all your cooldowns back, now you get that numbers advantage, then you can go in with your team as a 5v6, and you can carry team fight after team fight. I mean, you've seen those different level players, but you don't even have to be to that level. All I'm saying is you have to out 1v1 some of the players at your rank. And of course, if you do the things like set up for the best engagement and being alive and master movement, you're going to be able to either take duels a lot of the time that are unfair, right? You're not taking a straight up 1v1. You're doing a whole bunch of damage to an enemy that doesn't know you're there. They're already weak, and that is good enough a lot of the time. But if you can master this fourth step, this is how you turn just being a very good Tracer into being a hard carry Tracer. And that is winning the 1v1 straight up, just out 1v1 mono e mono. And Tracer has the tools to do that against legitimately every character in the game. So put in the grind, put in the practice. Of course, do all the other stuff I said before. But if you have any questions about how to master...
Okay, so I'm gonna give it a beefed. I'm gonna give it a beefed. I didn't like what he said at the start. Specifically about like playing high grounds more, but like honestly pretty good. I think maybe some more thought on how to position, like more backline and angle focus rather than frontline whenever you can would have been really important. But honestly, I thought it was pretty good. Like for a GameLeap thing, like this VOD, it touched on engagement timing, it touched on blink management, it touched on a lot of different things that I think are really important. So I think that would be a very helpful VOD for most people.